Hi everybody. We have Maria today. Maria is from the US, and I'm super excited to, hear Maria's story and also share with everyone. I've had a previous chat with her, and I was so filled with it. I'm like, come on, we need to film this. People need to hear your story because I believe it's gonna bless someone. So, hi Maria, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
Great, great. I'm good. I'm good. I'm super excited to do this with you. Just like I told you, I believe that your story is going to inspire someone, is going to help somebody. And that is why we're doing this. And that's also why we do what we do, because we want, people to hear things that would like give them hope and let them know that no matter what they are going through or no matter what they've been through, they're gonna pull through it. And hearing your story, the other day, it really filled my heart. I'm like, oh my God, God is a good God. And then we decided to film this, so that other people can hear it as well. But before we start, maybe you can just introduce yourself a little bit and tell everyone where you're from, and we start from there.
Okay, so I'm Mariah. I'm from Texas. I have been in Texas, this part of Texas, for almost 10 years. So I've kind of lived all over the U.S. Growing up, I lived in Arizona, I lived in Nevada for a brief amount of time, and Texas. So kind of between those three parts. I've lived by the border in Texas, and I lived now in the DFW area in Texas. So kind of all over Texas and Arizona, and yeah.
Amazing, amazing. I really can't wait to come to the US. I heard it's like a whole new world over there. So maybe one day I just come and see how everything is going there. But yeah,
Well, I
Maria.
think all of us are trying to go to where you are. So,
Yeah, yeah, but it would be nice to, just come experience the place, see the culture and see how
yeah.
things is done. I believe it's going to be an amazing experience for me as well. But yeah, the other day we had a chat and then you shared your story of God's goodness, in your life and his faithfulness. So maybe would you like to like share with everybody, how like your journey a little bit and just inspire somebody with your journey. Can we do maybe we can do that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Um, I'll kind of focus my journey on the last 2 years of
Mm.
it. I grew up in the church when my parents were married. We went to church every Sunday. My grandma every morning at 4:30 reads her Bible. My family is very, I've always been taught about the Lord. And, parents divorced, went astray from God for a little while, through a whole nother journey. But when I moved to DFW to Texas, I moved from another part of Texas to here about 10 years ago. I kind of reinstated my walk with God. And one of the requirements of me and my sister moving here and starting over, I made a promise to God that if He got me here and He got me through, because we moved here without a job, without a plan. We both knew we were going to go to school. We had no job lined up, nothing. But I promised God that if He got us through, that I would go to church every week and that I would walk with Him again and be obedient to just living my life for Him. And so I really reinstated my walk with God during that time. About 3 years, almost 9 years ago, I met my ex-husband. We were friends. We met in the church we went to church together. And that kind of got me where I was married. During that marriage, I had two children. One's 7 now, and one's 5. And so during that time, we're serving the Lord together. We are doing children's ministry together, all the things. And that kind of leads me up to the last 2 years of my journey, where I basically was a stay-at-home mom for 7 years. I didn't work a 9 to 5 because my ex-husband, he traveled out of state and sometimes out of country for work. So sometimes he was only home like six days in a whole month. And so because the cost of childcare here in the US is so expensive, it didn't make sense for me to work
Hmm.
because of the amount of money being paid. So that's how I became a stay-at-home mom. I had gone to school, I had been working, but made that adjustment for our family just so that we could not put our kids in daycare and one of us could raise them. So then that's, going good, stay at home mom, married. And then over a year ago, I basically became a single working mom within a matter of about 2 to 3 months.
Wow.
So, yeah, that was a huge adjustment. Obviously, when you go from someone being the sole income earner to now you're starting all over again and you haven't had that work experience, you haven't had, really anything of your own per
Mm,
se,
mm,
as far as income and things like that. It was a very, very big adjustment for me. And to kind of backtrack, a couple months before the marriage ended, I had gone with my husband's awareness and agreement because I wanted to make sure I honored the Lord and did things in order.
yeah.
And that we were in agreement with that. I had gone to my mom's in a different part of Texas, 4 hours away with the children, while we worked on the marriage and did the counseling over the phone and saw each other on the weekends. And during that time, the marriage, unfortunately, it was not saved. And so I got to a place where I had asked God, what do you want me to do? Because when I went to my mom's, I had feelings that it wasn't going to end well. So I had already started working there as well, but I was really praying that it would be restored and it was not. And God told me to come back to DFW. And so during that time, I had a conversation with God and I said, well, if I go back there, I have no family there. So you're really going to have to make a way because in me coming back here with my children, while their dad's here, none of my immediate family is here at all. Um, all of his family is here, but when you're going through divorce, while his family has been very good to me, it is a different when you have your own immediate family to help support you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So came back to Fort Worth and basically living on a prayer. To be quite honest with you, we still own the house together, so we were still living together in that house at the time, but like we had our own weekends with the kids, and I would leave during his weekends, he would leave during my weekends. And during that time when I came back, I knew number one, like I need a job.
Yeah.
And so I had been applying to many jobs. I had been doing food deliveries for a couple of years anyway, so I was still doing that. But I had really just been applying anywhere, like it didn't even matter. The coffee shop. And I kept getting told, oh, you don't have enough work experience.
Wow.
Oh, you don't have the skill set. And so they're like, that's great. You've been a stay at home mom, but like, you're not what we're looking for. And so my sister-in-law at that time, she's still my sister in Christ, but she told me about a staffing agency that she got hired through after college. And so I applied there. He said, what are you looking for? I told him, well, ideally, I would like to make $20 an hour, but just so I can get on my feet. But if not, I'll just take whatever you can find.
Yeah.
And he had applied me to some places, and they were like, well, she doesn't really have the experience we're looking for. And I get a text one day from a friend of mine that had been a friend for many years. And she texted me and said, hey, you applied for my company. And I was like, no. Like, I didn't even know where she worked. I was like, where do you work? And she said, technical transportation. I said, I'm like going through my applications online. I'm like, I didn't apply there. And not literally 2 minutes later, I get a call from the staffing agency and they tell me, hey, we applied you to this company called Technical Transportation. So I text my friend and I said, oh my gosh, it's the staffing agency. They applied me there. She said, well, my manager asked about you and I told them to hire you. And I'm
Oh.
like, okay, this is clearly of God. So the recruiter calls me and he says, I said, you applied me to my friend's company. I have a great reference there. I've known him for years. And he was super excited. He goes, great. So you're probably going to get the job. I go to the interview. Well, first of all, they wanted me to work 8 to 5. And I didn't have the childcare to do that, nor did I have the funds to pay for that childcare. So I called the recruiter and I said, is there any way they would pay me the same amount of money to work 8 to 2 p.m. until I can get, I'm going through a divorce till I can just get things situated. And he said, "Ooh, I don't know if they're honestly going to do that. Most companies probably won't, but I'll ask." He calls them, they say yes. Go to the interview, they hire me on the spot. So I'm like, okay, great. I'm like, praise God. That was totally of God. Like, there's just no way. DFW is huge. I mean, they could have applied me anywhere. So I have worship night at my church that night, and because at that time we only had one family car, and so obviously I need a vehicle, but I don't have the funds to buy a vehicle yet, nor do I have the funds to go get a car payment either, because I'm trying to get financially stable again, right? So I'm like, okay, God, great. Like, you got me a job and I need a car. Or show me a way to get to work or something. And so I go to worship night at my church, and it's only worship, and I'm just singing and praising God. And the pastor, which, mind you, I hadn't been to this church in 10 years because it was a church I went to before I got married. The pastor gives the time for, like, hey, if you see someone that needs prayer for you, can you go and pray for them? And there was this lady behind me, and I just kept feeling the Holy Spirit telling me to go to her. I didn't know who she was. I go over to her, and she ends up being the pastor's wife. And she tells me, it's so funny that you walked up to me because God gave me a word for you. And
Wow.
she said, God told me to tell you that you're in the wilderness right now, but don't worry. Everything you're going through, God is going to bring you out of, and you are not
Amen.
alone. He has not forgotten about you. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, she's like, I don't know. Does any of this fit? And I start crying, and I'm telling her what's going on. And she's like, oh my gosh, wow, that seems like a lot. And I'm like, it has been, but thank you for your word of encouragement. So I leave the worship night. And at this time, I had asked the kid's dad, like, hey, can I take the car to worship night? And he said yes. And when I'm on the way home, a family friend calls me who I knew through my best friends. I knew them, but they really didn't know everything that was going on. They knew of some stuff, but they didn't know the magnitude or the details. It was basically like my best friend had called her because we'd all been in a Bible study group together, and had told her, hey, please pray for Mariah. Like, she's getting divorced. It's not good. She called me and she says, hey, she's like, how are you? I'm like, I got a job, but I'm just praying for God to send me a vehicle. She goes, well, that's so funny because me and Greg were talking, and we feel like God is telling us to let you borrow our extra vehicle. The same day, literally.
Oh my God.
So I'm like, okay, God, like, I see you. And I'm like, okay, great. Yeah. So they bring me the car. The next week I start my job. The first day of my job, I go to my car to, like, start it to go pick up my kids from school, and the car doesn't start. I'm like, oh
All
Lord,
right.
like, what now? So first day at this job, I go back into work, and I'm like, because we had a huge shop, like, in the back where the freight was held and stuff, and I say, can someone jumpstart this car? I call the people and I say, hey, their names are Lindsay and Greg. I've thanked them a million times, but shout out to them when they watch this
Wow.
for being obedient to the Lord. But I call them,
Wow.
I say, hey, this car won't start. I don't know if it's the battery. Like, I can try to find the money to get the battery replaced. They go, don't worry about it. We have another car you can use.
Oh my God. Come on.
I'm like, no, like, they're like, no, this car is actually more reliable. It's newer. We're just going to bring it to your house. If you can get the car jumped, the car you're using, we'll drop the other one off. I get back to the house, the car's there, and it's like an Acura SUV. It's only 2 years old. And I call them and I'm like, this is way too nice. I'm like, are you
Oh
sure?
my.
And they go, yes. And I said, well, I'm going to try to pay you, what I can every month out of working. And they're like, don't worry about it. Just pay us what you can.
Wow.
So now I have a vehicle I'm using. I'm working. I'm, trying to save up. And in the meantime, we're still living in the same house, but it's not going very well. And so a friend refers me to a place in DFW called One Safe Place for women who go through any type of domestic violence, financial, emotional, not just physical. I was not physically abused. There were some other
Mm.
things going on at that time.
Yeah.
And I qualify to get services through them. And so, and in saying all this, I do want to preface that this is not a story of any type of shame or anything
Yeah.
on my
Yeah.
ex-husband.
Yeah.
This is just to highlight God's goodness. He's a
Yeah.
great dad.
Yes.
At
Yes.
this season, he was a different person than he is now. So I do want to preface that, and I don't want to cast
Yeah.
a shadow on him or be disrespectful.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyways, so I go to this place to get services. I qualify for services. They help me just get connected to a lot of different resources here, and they
Mm.
offer me free counseling and all this. So now we're getting ready to sell the house that we have owned together, and that is a challenging task. Even if you, even in the midst of, even if you both agree to be divorced and one of you didn't agree and the other one wanted to be divorced, I don't care what it is. It's not an ideal situation.
Yeah.
And so, things were just not going well. And so, during this time, I am praying for another place to live just because I want my kids to be in a peaceful environment. I want to
Mhm.
be in a peaceful environment. And so, I have a contract at the company that the staffing agency got me. Well, they're wanting me to work 8 to 5, and because I thought that I would be further along in my journey financially, I thought that I would be able to afford childcare or get on childcare assistance through the state, but the state ends up being so backed up from COVID to approve me for childcare that
Wow.
like I'm literally not able to get approved. And so I end up going to them and I'm like praying for a different job because I'm just not able to fulfill the hours they're wanting.
Mm.
And so I started applying to now new jobs, and the Lord has tells me to apply at my kids' school where they were going before. So I apply to work in the cafeteria, and I get the job. I don't even interview in person. I interview over the phone. It's like a 10-minute interview. Yeah, it's like
Oh,
a 10-minute interview,
wow.
and they're like, "You can just start. Can you start next week?"
Oh my.
And I said, well, I thought that the position y'all had, it said it's for next year and I need something right now. And she goes, well, it's actually really random that this would open up towards the end of the year, but we had someone who left and we need someone immediately. So they're like, we can train you at your kids' school where they go to school, but you probably won't
Whoa.
stay there. You'll have to float to different schools. And I'm just like, okay. Well, so get the job. The schedule is perfect. The pay is very low. And I'm just in my head thinking, Lord, like, I can't even afford to ever live on my own on this amount of money. So, what are we going to do about this? And so, I'm working at the cafeteria now. I'm still I'm still borrowing a car because my
Mhm.
whole goal was to have a car, only borrow a car for 3 months.
Mm.
That did not end up working out.
Wow.
Um, and so I'm working at the cafeteria and I'm, just thinking in advance, like, this isn't going to be enough for me to even ever live on my own. And so during this time, we are also in the process of not only selling the home, but we're also in the process of the whole divorce process. And it's very expensive. It's very expensive. And so I had opted to self file for divorce just because I didn't want to get attorneys involved. I really wanted to do it mutually. Like, if you want to be divorced, I would rather do it mutually. Obviously, the goal was not to be divorced in the first place. So,
Yeah.
unfortunately, that did not end up happening because an hour before the appointment to finalize everything, I got a call saying that he had gotten an attorney, that I was now required to get an attorney. So I also have that extra cost that I'm having to borrow money from my mom to pay for that. So now I have that on top of everything else. And so I'm like, okay, God, what are we gonna do here? So I'm just praying for a miracle in a place to stay that I can keep my kids in the same school district, because here, if you don't live in a certain zip code, you're not zoned for that school
That's
district.
cool. Oh, yeah.
So I'm being offered Section 8, which is Section 8 here. If you're unfamiliar with what that is, it's basically low income housing. But all the areas that I was offered were like not safe. And so I was just like, oh, like, I don't feel like that's a good idea. So my advocate at the Center for the One Safe Place for Women is like, well, just try to tough it out. So I get a feeling to go look for apartments, and there's these apartments that I had been wanting to live in, but they were way over my price range.
Mm.
But I see a sign that says we're offering a special. So I go into the apartment complex and I'm like, I'm just thinking this is not gonna work out. And that's why you should never doubt God. And I go in and I'm like, what
100%.
special?
100%. I
Literally.
agree. Never doubt God.
Yeah.
Guys, hear this. Never doubt God.
So yes.
Come
So
on.
yeah. So I go in and I'm like, what? I'm asking them, what special do you have? And they told me that they're taking, either you can get it's like the money all at once, or they can space it out and they can take it off every month of your rent. Well, the rent ends up dropping $750. And even the lady
Come on,
working,
Jesus.
yeah,
Whoa.
even the lady working the apartment complex goes, I don't know how rent is this low for this unit. Like, no one pays this. And they only had two left. And so I said, at this time, I had to go backwards a couple years. Me and my daughter had been in a car wreck. And I had been basically like praying that the Lord would allow my ex-husband to let me keep that money, because it was just enough to where I could like get my own place and kind of be okay for a few months till school ended. Because at this job I'm taking in these schools, I'm not getting paid during the summer when I'm off work.
Mm.
So he is like, you can keep the money. So I'm like, okay, so I keep this amount of money. It's enough to get me moved in, get me by for a couple months. And I felt like the Lord was saying, like, yes, go ahead, because I'm asking God, okay, but during the summer, like, how am I going to pay for this? And God's just telling me it'll all work out. My realtor's like, no, the house will sell by then. You'll have the equity. You'll be okay. So I end up asking her, the price is in the amount of price that I could afford.
Mm.
And so I end up getting the apartment. I end up getting approved. They allow a cosigner, because the other thing, the obstacle I'm finding is that every time I'm applying for apartments, they're making me pay an extra deposit because I don't have any rental history.
Yeah.
So even though I've owned a home for 4 years, because the home was through a VA loan and I was not on that VA loan because I'm not a veteran, they did not count that as rental history. So I'm
Mm.
also having to ask God, okay, how are you going to come up with the extra money to pay the deposit? That's where the check came in from the car wreck. And so, and at this time, things are really like not good between me and the kid's dad. So the fact that he allowed me to keep that money was really of God.
It's God. It's God.
Literally. So now we're working at the school, just to recap where we're at.
Mm.
We're working at the school. We are still borrowing a vehicle, don't have my own vehicle. And we got a place to live. don't have anything to put in it, but we have a place to live, which whatever, that's fine. I'm just like, okay, God, it'll work out.
Oh my
Some people
God.
donate me some items just to get by. I get some air mattresses. And I'll have to send you pictures. And it's just like 2 chairs in the living room, air mattresses in the bedroom. And I'm like, you know what? It's okay. It'll all work out. So that happens. And then the house is still, so at this time, we put the house on the market to sell. And the housing market here is like houses are sitting for 4 or 5 months. So we put the house on the market to sell, and we've had a lot of people look at it. We really haven't had offers because there's a million houses in our neighborhood, the same new
Oh,
construction type of house for sale.
mm.
I'm just praying because I'm on a timeline now, right?
Yeah.
Where I have my own place, but I'm not officially getting any child support yet. So also summer is coming up and I don't get paid. I don't make any money because in the schools, when you're hourly, you don't make money when you're out of school.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really like, okay, God, like we got like 2 months here till summer comes. And I'm
Oh
kind of at this
man.
point, kind of running out of money because yes, I'm working, but the paychecks are not that great. Nothing is finalized. Haven't really gotten like a set amount of child support every month.
Mm.
And, just starting over, I left all the furniture and all the things in the house because when you're selling a house, you have to have stuff in it to stage it and blah, blah, blah. So, and then also I need a vehicle still. Um, when I'm just about to run out of money, um, my uncle was like, you can borrow one of our extra vehicles and give these other people their vehicle back. So I'm like, praise God. Because I knew it was coming time for me to return that vehicle, but I
Yeah.
still was
Yeah.
not in a place to buy my own car.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I returned them the vehicle, the wife sends me a cash app and it's all the money that I paid her,
Oh Jesus.
except for
This
like
is
a
this
hundred
is getting
dollars.
better. Wow.
I'm like, why did you keep this money? And she goes, God told us not to spend it.
God.
We felt like it was your money.
God.
So now that gets me by another month, right? So it's like every time that it's literally in the midnight hour,
He shows up.
God is just blazing away.
He
He's just
shows
like
up.
blazing away. And so the house, we get an offer on the house. So we're about to lower the price of the house. I'm like, let's just lower it. It's not selling. And the day before we lowered it on the actual portfolio online, we get an offer for the full price we were asking for. And it's through a VA loan,
Oh
so we already
my.
know, okay, this is probably going to finalize. They're going to pay the money.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
so we're waiting for everything to finalize there, and I don't want to say who they are just because of certain things,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I have someone who I had helped, uh, a friend that I had been helping for a little over a year. When I was married, they contact me and we meet up and they hand me an envelope. Um, they were like, we were led to give this to you. God said you needed to get you by. And I opened the envelope and it's $5,000. So
Oh my God.
when I open the envelope, I'm looking at the hundreds and I'm like, this is a lot of money. And I go and count it. And I cannot believe, like, I just start crying because this is getting ridiculous now.
Oh
I
Jesus.
try to give it back, they will not accept it. And so, literally, um, this is now carrying me through the next month. Okay. So now there's a month left of school. Okay. There's a month left of school. And Actually, no, now there's only 2 weeks left of school. We've had an offer on the house, but we keep having these like weird things happen to where the paperwork is not, we're waiting on the VA
Mm.
to do something and it's just taking a long time. And I'm just praying because I know summer's coming and I know that I need a vehicle. And so um, 2 weeks before school, the realtor's like, hey, we're good to close on the house. And then the lawyer calls and they're like, hey, we have court. So we end up having court and the signing of the house the same day. In the process of this, let me think how I want to phrase this. There is a disagreement between me and the kid's dad to where he is saying he's not going to sign to split the equity of the house. And so we end up going to court. He ends up having to split the equity of the house. And now I only have 2 days left of school. So 2 days before school ends, before summer, when I'm not going to get paid, after this whole year, the house closes and I leave with my half of the equity.
Oh my God.
And child support is going to start. So, which he had agreed to pay. And I didn't want to do it this way anyway, so this wasn't like a malicious.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm like, okay, God, I need you to show me where to get a car, what to do. And so I'm looking at some reliable brands like Subaru, Hondas, things like that. And looking at used cash cars, and it's like they need a lot of maintenance. They have a lot of miles. And so I'm like, Lord, if there's any way I could get a like newer car that's reliable, what monthly payment? I'm looking at my bills. I'm like, okay, I can afford this amount of payment a month. So I go to a couple dealerships and their interest rates are like crazy high, like 25%, because mind you, everywhere I go, the car that we owned wasn't in my name.
Yeah.
So they're like, you don't have any. So I've lived this whole life of 8 years of like owning a home, a vehicle, and none of it's showing. Picture you in your 20s trying to start over. That's basically where I'm at, except for I've lived a whole life of owning a home, cars, like none of it matters now. But now I have 2 kids that I'm trying to take care of.
Yeah.
And so very frustrating. Very frustrating. It's like every time I make 10 steps forward, I make 10 steps backwards. And so I go to this car dealership. I find a car that I like, but it just didn't feel right. The payment was a little bit higher than what I was wanting. It had more miles on it. And so I just felt led to go look other places. And so I'm looking online and I find this Lexus dealership, but they have a Subaru Forester SUV, which is what I was wanting because of its reliability. And I'm like, we'll go, but I don't know. It's probably not gonna, I don't know. It might be too much. We'll just see.
Yeah.
So I go and they end up literally giving me lower than the monthly payment that's in my budget for a lower interest rate. And they're like, we can give this to you, but because we understand your situation that you've owned a home and you've owned a car, but like, that's not showing on your credit report. And I'm like, well, it wouldn't show because it was in his name. And they're like, well, you have to have a cosigner. So I'm like, that's fine. Luckily, my mom co-signed for me. And it was very, like, at some points embarrassing almost. Or I feel like the enemy tried to make me feel embarrassed because you're in your 30s and you lived, like, the last 8 years the American dream. Our house was brand new built for us. The car we owned, 2023 car. And it was very frustrating because it can be very degrading. Like you're going to a safe place for women.
Yeah.
You're going to apply for these things and you are working and you have been a productive member of society, but it almost can seem like nothing I do is good enough. And so there would be times where it would be a little bit like humiliating or feel humiliating. I don't see it that way anymore because I've
Yes.
healed.
Yeah. Mm.
You have these two kids with you who have seen you, live this life for 8 years, and now they're seeing you at the food stamp office, at
Wow.
the pantry,
Wow.
being told, like, no, sorry, we can't approve you. It was very discouraging at times to, it's like one pendulum to another. And so, anyways, the car ends up being 2 years newer. It's only a 3-year-old car, and it only has 20,000 miles on it. The other car had like 70,000 miles on it.
You know,
And so,
it's crazy, hearing your story, it's crazy how God shows up for you every, like, when you are at the brink of things, when you are like at the edge, he shows up for you, and it's just it's just mind-blowing. That's just what it is. It's
literally,
just mind-blowing. Come on.
yes, yes. So, yeah, get the vehicle, and I was able to. I was needing some furniture for the basic things really, and my mom was like, you should try to get furniture, at least your couch, finance it so that it'll build your credit back up, so you have
Mm,
something.
mm, mm.
Um, because even the credit card that I had was through my ex-husband's joint account. And so that was not, I did have no say so over increasing the limit, lowering the limit. There would be times where it wouldn't work, and I would call, and they'd be like, well, you have to call the main account holder. And that was even while being married. So when
Uh,
that was shut off, now I don't have any revolving credit. Well,
mm.
if you know how credit works, if you don't have revolving credit, it's very hard to get new
Yeah.
credit lines.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I told my mom, we can go look, but like, I don't think anywhere is going to approve me. We go to this place, we go to a few places, and it was like, oh, this is okay, but it's not really what I was wanting.
Wow.
And I asked people, like, do you think I'll get approved before they run my credit? Most of them are like, no, you know, no. I go to this other place, and she's like, do you want to put this couch on credit? And I'm like, well, I mean, nowhere's approved me. And she goes, no, I think you'll get approved without a cosigner. I end up getting approved for a $4,000 credit line.
Wow.
And I don't use it all. I just use what I need for the couch.
Yeah.
But now I have a way for revolving credit. And the
Hmm.
payment ends up being like $78 a month. So it's like super affordable. But
Wow.
anyways, yeah, end up getting the things that I need. I'm not blowing the money on just whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to be wise about what I'm doing, but when you're starting over, like it's expensive nowadays. So I'm able to even put a huge chunk of money down on the car to get it down to the car payment I want. Which some people are like, financially, that's not smart. But in my situation, I had to do what I had to do, so
Yeah.
it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so now back to the job thing. I'm really praying for another job because I know that when the school year starts, they don't pay enough. So a couple that we used to do ministry with at a different church when we were married tells me about this school. They're like, you should apply there, to be an assistant teacher or just work in the front office or something. I'm like, well, I don't have my degree. And they're like, no, you don't need it because it's a classical liberal arts education. It's not a public school.
Mm.
And unlike public schools, they have assistant teachers in every single classroom, grades kindergarten through fifth grade.
Yeah.
I'm just, okay, I'll apply. We'll see. I find it, I apply. That week, I get a request for an interview, and I am very honest with them in my interview because we have to do a like a practice teaching session.
Yeah.
And I have ran daycare out of my home. I have worked in children's ministry, but I don't have my degree in teaching.
Mm. Mm.
And they ask you on the interview, one of the last questions was, what is your favorite a philosopher. And I just tell them I'm the same. I say, honestly, no one. Like, I believe in
Oh,
God. I have a huge
yeah.
faith in the Lord. He's where I go to for all my advice. And that's just my belief. I don't have a philosopher that I can teach children about.
Mm,
Like, I'm just going to be totally transparent with you.
mm.
They do the interview. I tell them, like, I'm a single mom. Can my kids go to school here? And they're like, they hire me on the spot for the job, but they haven't given me an answer on if my kids can go there. And they're like, well, we're totally full. But maybe if someone drops off and doesn't enroll, your kids can fit. And I'm like, yes, because it's not going to work if I can't, like, I can't
Yeah,
be at two
yeah,
places at once.
yeah, yeah.
So 2 weeks go by, haven't heard if my kids get accepted. And I'm just thinking, okay, Lord, like, if not, I guess I'll just go back to working in the cafeteria. I get an email saying, hey, we were able to get your kids in. So it's more
Oh
money.
God. Oh
It's
God.
more money. It's perfect because I can, you know,
You don't have to
work.
move around like, go
I
pick your
don't have to
kids and
move
then
around.
yeah,
I don't need
yeah,
childcare.
yeah.
It's a very good education for my children, better than a
Mm.
public school. And so they
Wow.
get in. And so, yeah, and that's where I'm at now.
Praise God. It's just like I
Oh, wait,
said.
I'm sorry. Let me add
Okay.
one more thing.
Yeah.
So during this whole time, I need dental work done to my teeth. And it's very expensive. And I'm like, really can't afford it. And so now that everything's done, I've slowly been like chipping away at this dental work I need done after the divorce. And
Mm.
I'm kind of just at a place where I don't have any more money to put into that. And so didn't tell anyone about it. I go and they're like, you're going to need this surgery. It's a total of like $5,000.
Wow.
Okay, I'm just, okay, God, well, the surgery's $5,000. What are you going to do about it? Because every time we have
I
a
love the
need,
way I love the way you talk to God. I just love it because some people, some before you continue, some people feel that God is like, this man upstairs that is like so far away, that can be assessed and all of that. We need to understand that we can actually have a close and intimate relationship with God, talk to him as our friend and he will respond to us. I
right.
remember sharing the story with you the other day we spoke that I was just driving out in the morning and I just looked at my, passenger seat and I'm like, hi, Dad, how are you?
Mhm.
And right there and then it felt so like I could feel God's presence. It was so powerful. I was just so touched by, I don't even know why I did that, but I'm like, hi, Dad, how are you today? And I was just having a conversation with him. So some people feel that God is so far away, I need to do A, B, C, D before I talk to him.
Right.
But the way you actually communicate with God is something that needs to be learned in maybe in Harvard University, you know?
I just, something that my mentor through the nonprofit that I work for on the side has told me through the last 2 years of my marriage, and just I really was interceding that that would be saved, and through wise counsel was you need to stop worrying about um, provision. Just lay the bill on the table. And what his mentor taught him was tell God, God, here's a bill for you to pay. What are you going to do about it? And so ever
Oh
since
my
then, that's what
God.
I've been doing. And so, even in the last 2 years of the marriage, I would pray and intercede and see things start to shift. And I don't know. Even since I was a little girl, like my mom just said that I've always talked to God like that. I don't know.
Wow.
I just, even when I'm mad, I'll be like, wow, God, they're really freaking annoying. Like, what is going on? I'm just I feel like we forget that God was a person. I mean, Jesus was a person that walked on the earth. Like, the disciples talked to Jesus in the flesh.
Wow.
We, like, I'm not saying that he's a human now, but we forget that there's a part of God, right? Because they're all connected. Like Jesus was a human.
Yeah.
He laughed, he cried for people, he grieved
Come
people,
on. Come
got
on. Preach.
frustrated with people. And so we forget that intimacy. It's
Mm.
almost like we don't feel like we're allowed to have that intimacy with the Holy Spirit and with God. And that is truly, I feel, where, especially in the US,
Wow.
people, the enemy keeps people from, I don't know, that authentic relationship where we go to church every Sunday and we listen to the word and we listen to these sermons, but that expectation is not there because we don't have the intimacy
Mm.
to literally just say, hey, like the dentist is saying, I need this done to my teeth. Show me a way to get the money or bring me the money or show me what to do. But this
Wow.
is the bill that I have and it needs to be paid. And so, even in that, I was telling my friend, I didn't tell anyone about this, mind you.
Wow.
I just was praying about it. I was just, okay, God, and not even out loud because we know the enemy listens to us too. I was praying in my head,
So
right?
good. This is so good.
Like, I don't even pray out loud anymore unless I'm
Oh
declaring
my.
something because the
Oh
enemy
my.
uses things we say against us.
Yes.
He also is listening. He wants to know our desires. So if I'm really desiring something, I don't even pray out loud anymore. I just, in my head, me and you, God, we're like this. We're locked in. And so
Mm.
I'm texting my friend and about something, and a person that I wouldn't even expect sends me a huge amount of money to go toward the first part of my procedure on my teeth because total it's like 7 grand. And then the other half of the car settlement that I've been waiting to come in, they call me and they're like, "Hey, your check came in." This is all within 3 days apart. And it is the other half I need to get the first half of this procedure done. Because total, it's about 8 grand, 7, 8 grand for the total, like the
Yeah.
complete finish.
Yeah. Everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then I'm like, okay, cool. That's, praising God. I'm like, this is crazy. And people in my Bible study group are like, what is going on? Like, this is insane. And then even after that, the kid's dad, because this whole time we're going through the divorce, the money was, I didn't really care to, in Texas, it's very common that, well, you can make him pay spousal support and you can make him give you half of his 401k. I never wanted to go that route because I wanted to be intentional about sowing deeds of kindness, even through a
Yeah.
divorce.
Yeah.
And so, something that I've learned along the way through this journey of life is that if we can show mercy and grace to other people, God will give us
Come
that back
on.
when it's our time. And so,
Amen.
even when
Yes.
for me, the house selling was a huge, that was the hardest thing for me to come to peace with because I
Mm.
moved 17 times before I was 12 years old, and I always
Mm.
wanted a home for
Home.
my
A
kids to
home.
grow up
Yeah.
in and that consistency. And so that house being sold was so hard for me. And so I went to counseling over it, and she goes, a home for your kids is wherever you make it. It's not it's not wherever four walls reside.
Yeah.
You can live in
Yeah.
your car.
Yeah.
And so what I started doing when we listed that house for sale, which I didn't talk to you about this the other night, but what I started doing was I started praying over the walls of the house. And I prayed that the people, sorry, it was a very emotional time for me, but I think it was why I was able to heal and let it go. I would pray over the walls and I would pray that the people that bought the house would encounter Jesus and they would be able to feel the Holy Spirit in that house, and that
Oh
if
my God.
they didn't know the Lord,
Come on.
that something in that house, that they would be protected in that house, that they would laugh, that they would have good memories there, that they would have love there. And, I watched my kids take their first steps in that house. I watched my kids do, oh gosh, my daughter said her first words in that house. Like, we had two dogs that I had to give away because I couldn't bring them with me to the apartment. I watched my kids really, those core memories, like, it
Mm.
was really hard for me to let that go, but I just prayed, that I would tell my I prayed that they would be good with my neighbors. And, a family ended up buying it with three little kids, and I hope that they're doing well. But that was just
Wow.
something else I did in that season too. But
Wow.
yeah, the teeth thing got paid for. I had my surgery this morning, the first half of it.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at today. So,
Amazing. Like, this story keeps getting better. It keeps getting better and better. And I'm sure someone is going to be encouraged with this, knowing that God is always right there. All we just need to do is just to call out on him, and he
mhm.
will show up for us because your story is it's one that really show of God's faithfulness. Like he's God can really be trusted. I keep telling people this, that God can really be trusted. You don't need to say, oh, maybe I'm not going to try God, I'm not going to have faith in him, but he can really be trusted. He can really be trusted. I want to ask you a couple of questions, and then we'll see how that goes. Is that cool?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I want to know, how has your relationship with God, influenced the way you parent your children?